The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on tips on how to handle data breach in compliance with GDPR. My name is Mark Fraser. I hope you can see and hear me. If you have audio, please do me a favor and type into the chat box just to confirm, yes, we hear you, or yes, we see you. Just to reassure us before we get started. On GoToWebinar, you will see on the right-hand side a number of menus that you have access to. There's a chat box and there's a question box. The question box will enable you to ask questions, which I will be asking to our technical expert, Boach Ozgen, at the end of the webinar. Yes, it's working. Can we have questions at the end? That's reassuring. People are communicating. Thank you, Ajay and Anne. So let's get going. I'm Mark Fraser. I'm the new product guy from Bureau Veritas. I'm based in Paris. I'm just going to close that. I've been working with Bureau Veritas for 3 or 4 years now, and the GDPR area is obviously one that's very important for businesses. And this session today is going to be 40 minutes of content and 20 minutes of questions, maybe 15 minutes of questions now. And we're going to look at covering incident response, the BV technical standard, how to implement that standard, and a little bit about the process for incident response. I'm not the technical expert. Boach, who I'll introduce in a moment, is the man who's going to be sharing that knowledge with you. This is the free tips version of a longer in-depth webinar, which we will be running in June. We hope that you find this interesting enough that you decide to come back and pay for the in-depth webinar, which is going to be longer. We do have face-to-face training courses in the countries where we operate as well, with 1-day and 2-day courses on subjects related to GDPR. But for now, we're just going to start with this short webinar with the objective that you will understand how to prepare and practice to respond to breaches in order to be faster, more resilient, and to protect your business from reputational damage should you have a breach. And we'll give you a little bit of an overview of the Bureau Veritas Data Protection Certification Scheme. We have a technical standard, and we'll talk about how that will help you operationalize GDPR to fit into the procedures of your business. So yes, I'm Mark Fraser. I'm based in Paris. I look after enterprise risk and sustainability. Enterprise risk is really a group of all of the new risks that are coming out in business that are impacting. There's a group of products in there, anti-bribery, information security, these subjects, sustainability, more carbon footprint, green supply chain type things. I've been in the business for about 14 years, using management systems and certification schemes, and training and helping people to understand how to be better in terms of compliance, whether it's environment, safety, or other risks. So I'm not the expert, though, and Boach is going to talk to you. Boach's background is extensive. He's been on the ISO technical committee for the Business Continuity Standard 22301, and he's been working with IT schemes as an auditor and independent consultant for over 13 years. And he's going to be taking us through the next 35 minutes of this presentation to share with you the content. So I'm going to hand over to Boach. I would say if you have questions, I'll just remind you, there is a question box. You appear to all be able to use it so far, or not all of you, some of you have managed to use it, so that's the right thing. Thank you very much. If you have questions that occur to you, please type them into that question box. And in the last 15 minutes or so, I will ask Boach those questions so that you get the answers you want. Now, let me just hand over the reins to Boach and say thank you very much. Take it away. I will switch off my webcam as well in case some of you have bandwidth issues. Let me just...
Okay, it seems everything is going well enough. Well, Good afternoon from the UK. I'm glad that you arrived. And Mark, thank you very much for the nice words and for presenting me here. My name is Boach Özgen, and as Mark said, I'll be guiding you in today's webinar. Tips on handling a incident response, a breach response structure in compliance with GDPR webinar. Today we'll be talking about incidents. We'll be talking about some governance structure, how you can implement a governance structure from a different perspective, from Bureau Veritas's perspective. Actually, we'll talk about the technical standard that has been published by Bureau Veritas, and we'll talk about how it helps you to manage your incident response structure or personal data breach response structure in a better way, and how it's going to help you to deal with the investigators in case of a breach. So first of all, I would like to share the summary of tips that I'm going to cover today for you. So the first one is about the Bureau Veritas data protection technical standard. As I said, Bureau Veritas has published this technical standard a couple of years back, and it is now in the process of being accredited by the European Data Protection Board. It's a slow process. It hasn't finalized yet. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any accredited seal or certification scheme published yet in Europe or in other parts of the world. We're still waiting. It's kind of a slow process. Mark will give you more information about that in a minute. But that technical standards will help you to establish a more structured system in your organization to monitor your levels of compliance to GDPR. It also helps, to have some of the investigations. It helps to manage your relationships with the supervisory authorities and so forth. And we'll talk about these summary, these tips in a minute. But first of all, I would like to start with some definitions. This is very important from my perspective because there are three key definitions that I would like to discuss today. If we understand the differences between them, it will help us to establish our incident response, breach response structure for GDPR, and it will help us manage our relationship with the supervisory authorities. So these three definitions are taken from Oxford dictionaries. In general, in the UK, standard committees use Oxford dictionaries as the reference in general terms. It is not the official body who provide the definitions for the terms, but for this use, it is perfect. So the first definition I would like to discuss is event. Event is a single occurrence of a process. So something happened. That's fantastic. It's an event. It is not an incident. Well, it may be an incident. It may be a breach. It may be a personal data breach, but it's an event. Nothing significant. Events happen all the time. So the second definition that I would like to discuss is an incident. An event happened, but it is dangerous or exciting, so it requires more attention, more resources from our side. So this is what we call incident. And if the incident is significantly important when it is about failing to meet a legal requirement, a regulatory requirement, an agreement, a code of conduct, or something very serious, then we call it a breach. And the personal data breach is defined in GDPR as the loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of personal data which are processed by an organization. So these definitions are really very important. First of all, when you have an incident, this doesn't mean that it is a personal data breach. It is an incident, but it may be could be a health and safety incident, it may be a quality incident, it may be some IT incident, but it doesn't have to be a security incident, it doesn't have to be a breach, and it doesn't have to be a personal data breach. All personal data breaches are incidents and events, uh, but not all events are personal data breaches. So this distinction is very important, because personal data breaches, if they have high impact on the rights and freedoms of natural persons, then they have to be notified to the supervisory authority within a certain amount of time, and we will cover that in a minute. But if you have an incident which didn't have a very serious breach, for example, an IT cybersecurity issue, but it didn't include any kind of personal data, then you don't have to inform supervisory authority about that. We'll talk about it in a minute. So as you can see, the definitions are really very important, and we differentiated the terms. It is important from your relationship perspective with the supervisory authority. But there are some more things to that, actually. It has a lot of facets. So let's discuss how important is personal data breach response from your organization's perspective. So I would like to cover the penalties defined in GDPR in the first place. It was quite scary the first 2 years between 2016 and 2018 until it was published in May 2018. Everybody was just so scared. There were really very strange news about GDPR, about fines in the media, in newspapers, on social media and everything. And everybody focused on this 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover fine. So it was unacceptable. There was a rage, all around the world about this. But if you really look at GDPR, it is not that significant. Because the supervisory authorities and the European Data Protection Board are quite fair, or their capabilities make them quite fair, actually, that they have to investigate each individual incident, and they have to understand what the impact of the incident on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. So so the result should be proportionate. So if you lost 10 people's personal data, like names, email addresses, and telephone numbers, the supervisory authority won't fine you with 20 million euros of fine. So proportionality is one principle at this stage, and the supervisory authorities will be using it. So as I said, the supervisory authorities or the data protection authorities will be reviewing the incidents or the data breaches, personal data breaches, and they will do investigations. So what do they look during their investigation? They look at the nature of the breach and what kind of breach it is, what kind of data have been involved, how the breach was identified, whether you knew about the breach or you just heard it from the outside, from an external a white hat, cybersecurity company, or maybe you heard it from some blackmailers. So it gives the supervisory authority a certain level of understanding about how mature your understanding about your environment is, how mature your capabilities to collect information about your ecosystem is. And they want to understand the impact of breach, especially the impact on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. And they would like to see how cooperative you are, your organization, with the supervisory authority. The more cooperative you are, the smoother your relationship will be, because they will consider you as a competent and considered organization, and they can see that you are doing your best to deal with the situation. So it wasn't your intention to lose all the data and have a huge impact on the individuals out there. So all these things are considerations for the supervisory authorities. It is not all, obviously. There are some others that we can discuss, in the longer version of this webinar in June. But now, we talked about a lot of different perspectives of the incident preparation or breach response preparation. We talked about your maturity level, your organization's maturity level, capabilities, how committed you are, how interested you are, how cooperative you are. As you can see, cybersecurity incident response capability may not be enough to satisfy the regulators. So what do you need? You may need some help. You can definitely sort it out by yourself. But if there is an aid which can help you to sort things out in an easy way, that'd be great. This hierarchy of requirements is somehow embedded in GDPR, and GDPR is dependent on a couple of regulations and so forth, and it also creates some additional things. For example, the accredited seals and certificates. GDPR openly accepts some third-party accredited seals and certification schemes to be published and run. Codes of conduct, for example, if you're working in a sector that the association of that sector or professional body of that sector or one of the bodies of that sector can create a code of conduct and expect their members to work in alignment with that. Or if you are a multinational organization or a huge organization with multiple locations in different jurisdictions, then you can identify your binding corporate rules which need to be approved by the supervisory authority, so that you can save yourself a lot of hassle when dealing with the supervisory authorities. So today we'll be talking about Bureau Veritas data protection technical standard, which is a certification standard, and it will fall under the accredited seals and certificates set in this picture. So this is Bureau Veritas Data Protection Scheme Technical Standard. It is free. You can download it from Bureau Veritas website, and you will receive the link anyway. And I'm pretty sure that Mark has already sent the link for your convenience. Please download it. Have a look at that. You will see that it is very much aligned with the ISO management system standards, especially the latest version of the Annex SL based standards. So why is it important? Well, this standard, this technical standard, allows you to create a system to manage your level of compliance to GDPR. So it is important. It helps you to create a certain level of transparency, certain level of visibility, and also it gives you confidence. It allows you to create an aware organization. And it becomes quite easy actually to negotiate action items, budgets, and some further improvements to be more compliant with GDPR. As you can see, the accountability principle of GDPR requires companies to do some certain stuff, and many of these things are done in many organizations, but some companies don't do that, and they don't have any resource to achieve these things. If you have ISO 9001, ISO 27001, or similar management system standards, implementing the technical standard, the Bureau Veritas Data Protection Technical Standard, becomes very easy. But if you don't have them, the technical standard is quite easy to follow, and you can implement your own system to manage your GDPR compliance at a certain level. So what is this technical standard? We need to ensure that you understand it very well. This is Bureau Veritas technical standard. It is aligned with the management system standards, if you like. We don't call it a management system standard because it is particularly used for GDPR compliance, managing your level of compliance with GDPR. It has a very good approach because it is very much aligned with the structure of the Annex SL document that's been published by ISO. But we need to be very careful here that this is not a legal requirement. It is not a part of the regulation. It hasn't been accredited yet. It is going through the process of being accredited. But unfortunately, the supervisory authorities and the European Data Protection Board is still trying to streamline they're understanding their level of criteria and everything. So it is still, in progress. But once it is accredited, it can be used as an accredited certification scheme, so it will help you to manage your relationship with the regulators. But still, it won't be a part of the regulation. It won't be a part of the legal requirement. The organizations are still obliged to meet GDPR, the regulations, own individual requirements. This is a tool to help you to understand the requirements and to organize actions to meet those requirements. So this is very important. So this is the structure of the standard. As you can see, it is very much aligned with the management system standards. It talks about the governance structure. It talks about operational activities within the organization and also the support functions. It just touches everywhere, and it helps you to achieve a couple of certain things. For example, you with the targeted and collective and structured processes, you make your organization more aware organization in terms of GDPR. You manage your risks and budgets more effectively, and you manage the personal data breaches incredibly effectively, because it requires you to manage these things on a regular, exercise these things, practice these things on a regular basis anyway. And it creates really very good level of transparency. And if you have this kind of aid, potentially, I'm not saying it as a certain statement, but potentially, if you have a certification scheme like this, the supervisory authorities will give you credit for that, and they will be more understanding during the investigation. So should your organization has any kind of personal data breach, this will help to manage your relationship with the supervisory authority, and you can have an impact on the outcome. Okay, so let's come to data breach, personal data breach. As we talked about the personal data breach, it turns out that there is no one single process that you manage the personal data breaches. It starts from at a very early stage. You need to be committed. You need to be confident in your organization's capabilities in managing the GDPR compliance and the personal data breaches. And after that, you need to constantly monitor for the traces of potential data breaches. So in some cases, as you would probably know, there are lots of companies, who hear that they have been hacked from some outside companies, from security companies, from social media, and so forth. So this is not a good thing from supervisory authorities' perspective. So they expect you to be aware of your environment, to be aware of your processing activities, and the level of impact that you may create on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. So monitoring activities are very important. You need to be monitoring hardware inventory, software inventory, logs, access control, systems, access levels, configuration on the computer systems, mobile users, external users, remote users, your third parties. There are lots of things that you need to be monitoring for data breaches, for the traces of data breaches. If there is a data breach, if you identified some irregular activity, some unnatural, log entries, or some strange behaviors, you would definitely want to dig into that, and you need to analyze what's going on there. And let's say, as a result of this analysis, if you've identified a potential personal data breach, then you need to have a breach management plan, an incident or breach response plan, if you like, that has been created, maintained, and exercised on a regular basis. So normally, incident response or breach response has 4 steps: containment and recovery, which initially you identify the incident, you contain it, and you recover your your services, your products and services in the first place, and then you start assessing the situation, what happened, and you would like to understand whether further impact, whether the further impact is possible on rights and freedoms of natural persons. And all the collected data is gathered together, and then the supervisory authority is notified within 72 hours for high impacting breaches. And then when everything is finished, when everything is settled down, you go back to your records, and you would like to analyze how good you did during the response process, and if there's anything that you would like to improve, then you do it. Okay, so the first thing is, once you have a breach, a personal data breach, you would like to understand what is involved, what kind of data are involved, what kind of impact are we causing on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. But it is not that easy to do it at the time of the breach. Obviously, you need to be prepared for this kind of stuff. So the data protection impact assessment and risk assessment will help you a lot. GDPR doesn't require organizations, to carry out the DPIA and the data protection impact assessment and risk assessment. But it is always a positive benefit for the organization to have these things. The GDPR doesn't force any kind of acceptance criteria or level metrics, if you like, for the risk assessment or for the impact assessment. There's no defined methodology in GDPR, so it is left to your organization's judgment. So it's always good to be aware of that requirement and be aware of what kind of importance your processing of personal data carries for your organization. So it is important, once you have the breach, you carry out the assessment on the impact of this data breach on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. If it results a high impact, then you have 72 hours to report it. But I'm repeating it again, there is no defined methodology for DPIA or risk assessment, so that this is your judgment. If there's nothing wrong, if you exaggerate the impact and start reporting it to the supervisory authority, because once they investigated, if they come up with a conclusion that it wasn't a high risk to rights and freedoms of natural persons, then the case is closed. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you lost a couple of 100 million people's personal data, and you've considered that it was very low risk, nothing happened, and somehow the supervisory authority was informed about this situation and they started an investigation, and if it turns out that their consideration was completely different, their conclusion was a high risk, a high impact data breach, then you will have hard times with the supervisory authority to explain what you did, how you took that decision, and so forth. So be cautious, but don't over-report it anyway. Okay, so how do we understand the impact of the data breach during the incident? So we try to collect this information, what kind of personal data have been involved, how many data subjects have been affected with this, what kind of products and services have been affected, and we try to collect information about further risks and the coming danger, if it's an ongoing thing. And we need to understand whether this personal data breach is an ongoing situation. So we collect all this information and we follow our response plan. We contain things, we understood the impact, and we recover from that incident fairly quickly. And now we need to understand whether this has an ongoing risk on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. For example, if you realize that a lot of information has been lost and people started just seeing personal information all over the web, and it is a big risk to the rights and freedoms of individuals, and you need to take action by informing security professionals, the supervisory authority, and you need to take actions, obviously. So the second step of the incident response is all about that. You try to understand what further impact could be on the rights and freedoms of natural persons. Once you have all this information, and if it is a high impacting breach, personal data breach, then you have 72 hours starting from the time that you've identified the breach until you notify the supervisory authority. And the basic information they need is the nature and size of the breach, the DPO details, if there is one, and what kind of impact the breach created, and what you are doing to manage the impact on the data subjects. So this is a communication thing. This is not an incident response, obviously. It is not a cybersecurity incident response thing, but it is vital. It is very important for the existence of your organization. So this is very important. And at the end, you go back to what you have done, what happened there. You review your capabilities, what you have done good, what you have done wrong, and you try to identify improvement areas, and you improve your internal capabilities to treat the personal data breaches in the future in a more effective way. All right. There's another concept during the data breach response, which is the evidence collection. It is really very important to talk about this. There are two types of evidences you can provide to the supervisory authorities. Actually, the supervisory authority in the beginning may not be very much interested in the technical evidences, but further investigation will include these evidences too. But initially, they want to understand how mature you are, how committed you are, how transparent you are, how willing to cooperate with the supervisory authority you are, and how transparent you are. So to be able to do that, you will provide a certain some evidences. And the second level of evidences is the security controls related evidences. These are technical controls, that technical evidences that are collected through forensics processes, actually, and we'll cover that in a minute. So the accountability related evidences can include some meeting minutes, some reports, internal audit reports, the DPIA and risk assessment results, the information about your processing activities for the personal data, your governance structure to meet the GDPR requirements. So all these things, with all these things, you are trying to prove the supervisory authority that you are very serious in this processing business, and you are handling the data subjects, personal data, wonderfully well, and they treat you accordingly. If you can't prove these things, they will see you an immature organization, and they will treat you in a different way. This is not written in GDPR, but this is a behavioral stuff, if you like. And the technical evidence that you can collect may include the log files, some dump files of memories, some hard drive images, some database files. As I say, digital forensics area just covers a lot of stuff here. Obviously, legal admissibility of these evidences is really very, or maybe really very important in some cases, but it is not a huge topic, right? this moment, so that I'm not discussing it right now. But these are the technical things that you are going to be using for your own investigation. Plus, if there is a criminal activity going on, if some police force, need to be involved in that, you need to be able to provide this information, and also the supervisory authority eventually will require these evidences to submit it to them. So, as a summary, in this presentation, what I wanted to cover was, incident response structure. Personal data breach response is very important, and this is where all your preparation comes to life. And it is time for your organization to prove itself. So it is really very important, and that is not a black or white thing, unfortunately. It is based on your relationship with the supervisory authority, because hackers are everywhere. Any company can be hacked, or any company can have a personal data breach very easily, especially nowadays. So it is normal. But the way you handle things, the way you get prepared to this kind of stuff, the way you protect the personal data of natural persons will affect the conclusion of the investigations. So we are offering you an aid in that terms. The Bureau Veritas Data Protection Technical Standard may help you to get, even more mature in your governance structure for managing your compliance towards GDPR, and also it will help you to respond to the personal data breaches in a more effective and more confident manner. And also it will make your relationships with the supervisory authorities smoother, and you'll get easy investigations. The other one is the other tip I want to focus on is, please don't report every incident. You don't need that. But if you think that the impact of the data breach on the rights and freedoms of natural persons is high, then please just report it within 72 hours with the required information. It's really very important. Even if you're a small organization, please consider carrying out the data protection impact assessment. And if you if you have a designated a DPO, that would be very useful for the organization itself anyway. And keep records of these things, keep records of incidents, and keep records of your system, to show that you have been working towards compliance to GDPR. And please monitor your IT systems, and also some physical security and everything, to identify traces of incidents in case you have experienced an incident but you're not aware of that. And also please develop personal data breach response plans and exercise them on a regular basis, so that you become very confident in managing the responses to these breaches. So that was it. I would like to hand the microphone over to Mark now. He will handle the questions, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Boach. We appreciate that whistle-stop tour through breach response and its importance. It's obviously a very highly visible issue when it comes to dealing with the data protection authorities, and demonstrating maturity, demonstrating competence there should give you an easier ride. Good stuff. It's really just a teaser for the depth of content that we'll have. We're doing a 2-hour version of this webinar in June, and we're sharing the slides that Boach has presented with you, and you will see a number of links in those slides to these other courses that you can join up for, and other services, other tools, the technical standards. There's white papers. There's a load of information in there that we hope you'll find useful. But for now, I wanted to see if you have any questions. If there's someone who wants to type into the box, we have 15 minutes more time with Boach, which we can use to get to those particular issues that you may have. I'm just going to take over control of the PowerPoint here, hopefully, so that I can show content that may be relevant to those questions. So anyone got any questions? Please type away in the box. I'm just going to take over presentation duties as well. Where to find the BV data protection technical standard? Right, well, it's on our website. Let me just get my screen presenting. So hopefully you can see me in my web browser. So this is the lead portal where you will have registered for this free webinar. If you want to go into enterprise risk and data protection, you'll find the technical standard in here. It is a link in the presentation that we will send to you. We suggest you download it. There's a number of useful items. If I click on data protection here, you can see I've got rather a lot of things going on my screen at the moment. I don't know how much of this you can see. So this is talking about a webinar that we've got coming up soon. If I click on the download center, I know I can go to that. It's worth mentioning actually that, as Boach hinted, we are going through a process of accreditation for this technical standard. So you can see all of our documents that you can download here. So the technical standard related to personal data protection, I will just go to that page and paste that into the chat box so that you've all got it. The standard is built upon an accreditation which is to do with product and services. So it's not a strict management system in the sense that ISO 27001 is. It is ISO 17065 accreditation that we're seeking, but the GDPR regulation itself in Article 42 and 43 puts in place this ability to use a certification scheme. And so the standard was written by us and by technical experts with a legal background and with IT services, information security background, to align with management system standards, to be a simpler way to operationalize what is a big regulation. You know, there's a fair few pages, and this is a much smaller document. It's about 30 pages. There's some technical annexes that give you like comparisons between the regulation and the standard to show how the clauses match up. And it's supposed to be a lot easier to implement, and we found that our customers so far that have done the implementation and done the certification have found it very satisfactory. We would love to say it's accredited, and that if it is accredited, it will be able to give you proof of compliance, which is what the regulation expects. But as Boach mentioned, the European Data Protection Board hasn't finalized its guidance or its advice for the data protection authorities and the accreditation rules. So the version you're seeing here is version 1 of the standard. There was a version 0. So we're refining it and improving it each time. We expect that there may be one more set of updates required in order to meet that accreditation, and we're very much hoping to hear about that this year, but things have taken longer than expected so far. There is a list of various schemes and binding corporate rules and codes of conduct that are apparently awaiting approval, and ours is in that list as a generic certification scheme that applies to all businesses of all sizes. So I'm very much hoping that we'll have some good news for you on that soon. Are there any other questions? Any other questions?
Well, a couple of people said that they couldn't hear me well. Hopefully, if I didn't see these questions when I was talking, so so sorry if I didn't just speak loud enough. Hopefully, you got it right at the end.
I think they're having trouble with me actually. I see that one of our contacts from India, I think, guessing from the name, had a problem. I don't know if that was your end, but some people were saying it was fine. Maybe that was to do with bandwidth. We did switch off the webcams to try and make that easier. So I think if there's no more questions, I'd like to just run through a couple of additional bits of information to say that, yes, we've got this webinar that we've done today. The in-depth version is on the 26th of June. It's going to be priced at €40, run at the same time, morning and afternoon, so that people in Asia and people in the Americas can attend, and goes into greater depth. Boach will be the expert, and I'll be hosting again, and you can register by going onto the lead website, the link which I just gave you, but we will send this slide deck out, and there's a link in the bottom you can click on to register too. There is another free webinar this Thursday. We'll be running them at 10 a.m. European time and 4 p.m. European time, focusing in on the data protection impact assessment and the risk assessment. So Boach again will be the expert there, and there's a little teaser of the content that we're going to be doing, so feel free to sign up for that one. And there'll be a full 2-hour version of that again in June, the day after the other webinar. So I should mention we have a free app that's available if you want to download it from the Google Play Store or the App Store. It's available for both platforms, for your phones, for tablets, which is called iCheck for cyber and data. This means you can go through a diagnostic self-assessment of 55 questions to find out about cybersecurity and GDPR issues that you may have, so that you can understand points of suggested improvement, and then maybe engage with the services of someone to help you, or do your own research to find out how to improve. So this is a free download. I recommend you go download that now and test your readiness. Also, we do have training face-to-face. There's a one-day introduction for GDPR for business leaders, and that's being run in your local country offices. So contact your local BV office. There are links there. Boach does a virtual version of this. The next one we're hoping is going to be in September, depending on demand. We've ran one before. It runs about 4.5 hours. So you kind of get the one-day training in about 4.5 hours online. It's quite intense, so we split it into 2 parts. So you will get part 1 on, say, the Tuesday, and then part 2 on, say, the Thursday in the same week. And we'll run them in the morning and the afternoon in order to get different time zones. And also there's a face-to-face 2-day training on the technical standard on how to operationalize GDPR in your business, how to implement this technical standard so that you can really be in a position ready to certify, or just to reassure yourselves that you are practicing full GDPR compliance. And the technical standard I mentioned has a really useful appendix which shows an alignment, but we have a white paper which shows how 27001, the information security management system, 9001, the quality management system, and GDPR and our technical standard align. So you can download this white paper, Are You GDPR Ready?, from the website as well. Just to quickly mention, I look after enterprise risk. This is a portfolio of emerging products for emerging risks. The granddaddy of them all is ISO 27001, the information security management system, but we have business continuity, IT service management, asset management, anti-bribery management systems, all as emerging issues with emerging solutions in the procedures and processes of management systems and technical standards. So there's a lot more information about these if you're interested, which you can visit there on these links. Specifically, anti-bribery management systems, we have done some webinars like this with a different technical expert, Eileen Bernston, and you may go and view the free webinars and see the white paper on the lead platform. As compliance officers, you will find that it's not just data protection regulation that's keeping you up at night, but it's also anti-corruption, any number of environment, safety, employment law type risks. But we hope that you find the content for anti-bribery also useful. We have mastering courses for ISO 37001 and implementation courses. So thank you very much for your time. I did get another question while I was going through my marketing pitch. I don't know if that is, it's a really interesting, thank you. Okay, good. So it seems like that's it. We're at the end of our time. So I thank you very much for your attendance. I thank you, Boach, for your content and your expertise. And I'd like to say goodbye, and we hope to see you at the next session.
Well, thank you, everybody. See you next time. Bye.